tanghali and welcome back to our second part of the fourth webinar series. And it's about Rhino Grasshopper. This is a tawag dito, primer to your emerge next term. Di ba, Sir Lyle? Yun, and I'm very excited kasi I'm sure the students will learn more and apply those learnings that you, Sir Lyle, discussed last week. Yun. So before we start, we will be playing the um, data privacy notice, followed by the prayer. So, Sir Aldous.
Data Privacy Notice. De La Salle College of St. Benilde, or DLSCSB, respects your right to privacy and is committed to protect the confidentiality of your personal information, thus has adapted necessary organizational, technical, and physical measures to secure it. DLSCSB is bound to comply with the Data Privacy Act of 2012, or RA 10173, its implementing rules and regulations, and relevant issuances of the National Privacy Commission. By participating in this video meeting, conference, or webinar, you are consenting to our collection and use of information, including recording, in accordance with this privacy notice. Information is also processed via video conferencing platform Zoom. Please refer to their privacy policy at the website. The information processed, such as name, email address, your image, video, and audio, will be used for attendance, documentation, communication, and systems administration purposes by authorized individuals of department, office, or unit organizing the event, and other offices authorized to have access. We also use the information gathered from you for abuse prevention and privacy protection. DLSCSB shall only retain the said personal information until it serves its purpose, after which it shall be securely disposed of. Queries and complaints can be directed to the Data Protection Officer via email at dpo@benilde.edu.ph.
Let us put ourselves in the presence of the Lord. Together, let us say our Lasallian prayer. I will continue, O my God, to do all my actions for the love of you. Our Lady of the Star, pray for us. John Baptist de La Salle, pray for us. Saint Benilde Romanson, pray for us. Leave Jesus in our hearts forever. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. So again, good afternoon. And I don't want to take too much time anymore. And I will now give the floor to Sir Lyle to continue the tutorial on Grasshopper. Sir Lyle?
Good afternoon, guys. So this is a continuation of last week's webinar. So last week, puro tayo conceptualization, what you can do with Rhino Grasshopper and computational design. Although last week, hindi ko napakita pala yung mga ginawa namin sa Emerge. Maybe later kung may time pa, I'll show you some of their works. Okay, so for starters, let's try to open up yung primer. So this is ito yung parang basic na introduction to Grasshopper. This is by Mode Lab, and this is what I use to teach them mga beginners for Grasshopper. Ito yung pinaka easiest to understand na instruction or primer for Grasshopper. I hope you can see my screen. So, turuan ko lang din kayo how to read yung mga nandito sa table of contents. No? So, sa Grasshopper, here you have the foundation. Before kasi, this was made before like pre-Rhino 6 wherein hindi pa integrated yung Grasshopper sa Rhino. So, nandito is installation of Grasshopper, and then we will discuss later on yung anatomy of a Grasshopper definition, and then kung ano laman ng Grasshopper. Building blocks of an algorithm, designing with lists, designing with data trees and meshes. Lists, data trees, and meshes, we'll just go through them, yung concept. But for this session, since it's a workshop, mas mag-focus tayo on how to start tinkering with Grasshopper. Okay, let's try yung anatomy of a definition. So as we've discussed last meeting, Grasshopper is visual scripting or visual coding. Before Grasshopper, architects have coded, as in kinocode nila saan yung point, ganyan, and then where to, what's the next point to create a line. So lahat yun coded, as in tinatype natin yung actual code. But with Grasshopper, what they tried to do is make that into something more visual for architects and designers. So when you create a visual program, that's what you call a definition. So yung pinakita ko last week na definition or code or script ng project ni Zahadi, that's called one whole definition. That's an algorithm. Yung whole set of instruction na yun, it's called a definition here in Grasshopper. Medyo ganito yung itsura niya. These definitions are made up of nodes connected by wires. So this chapter will help us understand kung ano ba yung mga types of interfaces that we will encounter in Grasshopper. So before we go through this, let's go to the interface first of Rhino 6. I hope meron kayong open. I'll give you siguro a minute to open yung Rhino nyo. So this is the Rhino interface. And in Rhino, it's a 3D modeling software. So nandito lahat ng modeling device natin, points, lines, polylines, curves. So kung alam niyo naman na gamitin to, or if alam niyo gumamit ng SketchUp or CAD, it's something close to that. You have all the things that you want to create, yung mga primary shapes and 3D objects nandito. But okay, thank you, Sir Aldous. Okay, so this is the Rhino interface. You have all of the commands here. Point, polyline, curve, and then shapes, rectangle, etc. So you can draw here and then use this and import it to Grasshopper. But what I would show you today is mostly everything will be made in Grasshopper. Kasi in parametric design, it is best that we have control. So yun kasi parameters, diba? So a line has parameters. So pwedeng saan yung starting point niya and then gaano siya kahaba. A rectangle, ganun din. One side, gaano kahaba yung one side, side A, and then side B. So in Grasshopper or in parametric design, we're trying to control all of those parameters. So kapag nag-drawing ka dito and we import it to Grasshopper, what happens is fixed na siya. We can't really move it, change yung parameters ng shape na yun. So let's try it. Sana open na yung mga Rhino natin. To open Grasshopper, you just type Grasshopper, then mag-open up na siya. So this is the interface of Grasshopper. It's a separate window from Rhino. So these are called the components. Yeah. So yung mga components are the commands that you use to create the definitions within Grasshopper. So ito yung node and these are the wires. So let's try this. Ito is a point component, a vector component. So dito yung mga geometries. Same way as these are this. Pero itong mga to are just placeholders. Ang purpose ng mga to, these are parameters. So itong mga params na to, they are placeholders for definitions, or for geometries within the Rhino interface. So for example, you want to create a point. So you want to get a point from Rhino. So pwede kang gumawa ng point here and then use this as the parameter for this point. But besides, so before we go there, let's go back muna dun sa Grasshopper primer. So these are the parameters. Parameters store data, numbers, colors, geometry, and more. Basta information. Parameters are container objects. which usually show small rectangular boxes with a single input and single output. So ito siya, rectangular box, single input. Yung half circle na to represents an input. And then yung sa right side represents an output. So lahat ng mga components, ganun. Makikita nyo may input sa left side and then may output sa right side. So, input parameters like this, ito, pwede natin kunin yung geometry sa Rhino. So, how to do that is to first, then delete mo natin. Kuha tayo ng container or yung point. Then right-click. So, right-click, set one point. Then you select yung point that you like. What happens is, merong mag-overlay na X over it, a green X. That represents na it is already within the Grasshopper interface. So kapag sinelect mo siya, it will show as a green X. Ayan. But, kapag nag-deselect siya, red siya. Right now, nasa ilalim kasi yung red X. But it shows lang na a point geometry is in Grasshopper. Hindi lang siya nakaselect kaya siya red. You can also internalize that data, which means hindi mo need yung point na yon sa na meron siyang reference sa Rhino. So right now, this is referencing the point within Rhino. So pag tinignan natin to, hover over it, nakalagay dyan, one locally defined value and reference point, which means we're referencing the point in Grasshopper. So, kapag dinelete natin to, magkakaroon siya ng error. Sasabihin niya, a reference point could not be found in the Rhino document because, anong difference dito? Ibig sabihin, wala siyang laman. Pero kapag tinignan nyo itong bago, maglagay ulit tayo ng bago. This says floating parameter point failed to collect data kasi wala pa siyang laman. Ito naman, sabi niya, a reference point could not be found in the Rhino document. It means naman that this one has something in it, but it can't be found. Kasi ni-reference natin siya dito, but it's not there anymore. So if I create another point, di naman sila may reference because that's not the point it's looking for. So if we put it back, undo. Ayun. Nakita na niya yung point na sinasabi natin. So that happens because it's a reference point. So we can also, going back, we can also internalize that data, which means the data of this point will be given to this. Andito na siya sa Grasshopper information mismo. So what we do is we right click and internalize data. Even if i-delete ko na to, andun na siya. So this point is this one. Ito na siya. So makikita nyo na yung X mismo. Yung X na red, it means it's not selected. But this red X means it's a point in Grasshopper. So kapag kinlik mo siya, andun siya. So ito naman, you can create another point and you reference that. Select one point. Yeah. So now this is a reference point and ito naman is a locally defined point or a locally defined value. Meaning local, nasa Grasshopper siya. Gets ba? In difference ng dalawa? Okay. So, Grasshopper is defined by data. To check the data within a parameter, you can use panel. So, kapag magko-command kayo, you can double-click. So, enter a search keyword. So, type natin panel. So, a panel for custom notes and text values. What a panel does is, it shows you what information is within a component. So for example, ito. Yun. Sabi niya, it's a reference point, which means it's a point within Rhino and we're referencing it. Let's copy and then paste. So Control C, Control V. You can do that with any component. I-link natin siya dito. It says negative 14.933925, 10, 411, and 0. What do those numbers mean? Can anyone answer? Ano yung numbers na to?
Coordinates po.
Coordinates. Okay, if we zoom out, this is the top view. So, ito yung 0, 0. So, this is positive, positive x, positive y. Negative x, negative y. So, this is x, y, z. This is x, y, and z. As we can see, yung point natin is negative value sa x. So, negative x. And then yung y, nasa positive. So, positive. And then 0. Kasi, kung makikita nyo sa front view, nasa 0 plane siya. So, that's the difference now of these two. A reference point is within Rhino. A local point or local value is within Rhino itself. Anong difference na magagawa nun for us? It means we can have values or we can have geometries that are within Rhino and we can change manually yung geometry na yon and it will be translated into Grasshopper. We don't have to like define the geometry itself. So let's say for example, itong line na to, kuha tayo ng polyline. Ito, line. Then let's set one line. Sorry, hindi pala line. Polyline dapat. Curve. Ayun. My bad. So let's set one curve. Yan. So, now, meron tayong reference na curve. Yan, ito. And if we create a panel, we connect it to a panel, sabi niya, reference planar curve. So, kapag ginalaw natin to, within Grasshopper, yung curve sa Grasshopper follows. Right? And ito, you can design it the way you want. Manually though. But, you can also create curves yourself. Pero syempre, you will define what a curve is. So, later na yun. Let's go back to this. So, pinakita ko sa inyo yung parameters or containers of data, numbers, and geometry, etc. And you have, next is the components. Components naman, on the other hand, are perform actions. Dito yung parang command sa Rhino or sa SketchUp or AutoCAD. Yun yung mga commands. So, components perform actions based on the inputs they receive. So, meron silang input. And meron silang mga output depending on what kind of command they do. So, a few examples. Number one, multiplication component is an operator that calculates the product between two numbers. Let's try that. Multiplication. Okay, meron pala akong hindi nasabi, which are sliders. Number slider. So a number slider outputs the number that you select here. A slider, ito yung main natin na parameter slider. Ito yung main input natin na ginagamit for a lot of these definitions. We can edit this. Edit. So we can do a rounding or an integer. You can also do even and odd lang. So meron siyang max and minimum. So let's try this one. Floating point numbers. So meron siyang decimal. Minimum natin is 0. Pwede yung maging negative. Negative 0, negative 5.00. And pwede din siyang positive 5.00. Tapos, ang max natin, let's say it's 20, 00. Kung ilang zeros lalagay mo dyan, yun yung accuracy ng number na yan. So, let's say 2, ano lang, 2 decimal places. Let's start with this with 0. 0. Yan. So, if okay, yan yung range na from 0 to 20. 0.0 dapat 2 decimal places. Yan. If gusto naman natin whole numbers, papalitan mo lang siya. Edit, and ito, whole numbers. So 0 to 20. Or you can also type 1, a number na gusto mo, 0 to 20. Pag ginawa mo 0 to 20.00, magkakaroon siya ng decimal point. Okay, let's try this out. Again, a panel box will help you understand ano yung nangyayari. So, lagay tayong panel box dyan. This will be your friend in all of your definitions. Kasi minsan hindi mo alam ano nangyayari. So, sisilipin mo ano nangyayari. You connect it to the sliders. And as you move, ito yung preview of ano yung output dito. So, makikita mo kung ano yung nandito, yun yung nandito. So, yun yung nagiging output niya. So, if we connect this here, ang nilalagay nating number here is 9.16, which we can see, 9.16. Yan. 16.17. Same with this one. Kung ang input ang isa-slide natin, that would be the input for B. So, the component says that it's a multiplication component. So, A will be multiplied to B. So, 16.17 times 9. Nagawin natin silang whole numbers. Yan. So, 16 times 9. Yung madali, 5 times 10. So, we would expect 5 times 10 is 50. So, 50. So, kung ano ang slider mo here, will be the output for A. And then the slider mo here will be the output for B. And it will multiply to 180. 15 times 12 is 180. So, this one now, without the panel, this one now is actually a definition. So, this is already a definition. Understand? Clear naman? Okay, let's try another definition. 2, the divide component operates on geometry, dividing a curve into equal segments. So, let's type divide. Kung gusto nyo malaman nasan isang component, you just hold Control Alt and left click, then click nyo yung component, sabihin niya saan siya nakalocate. So, in this case, andun siya. A curve, divide curve. Na ito, Control Alt, click. Dun siya sa math. X. Or, just type it, divide curve. Pili ka na which one you're looking for. In this case, divide curve. Wala siyang laman, there's always a notification na may something. So, in this case, input parameter C. Okay. So sa display, medyo kapag hindi nyo pagamay kung ano yung mga components na yan, you can change this also. So, draw icons. Draw full names. Yan. So, divide curve. Curve, count, kinks, points, tangent, parameters. Pag medyo sanay na kayo, pwede tanggalin yan. And just icons. Kasi pag malaki na yung kapag malaki na yung component ay yung definition mo, magulo kapag ang daming pangalan. So what we do is simplify it to icons and no full names. But for the sake of this workshop, gawin nating full name so that you understand. Okay. So curve, count, kinks. This component says it divides a curve into equal length segments. So meron tayong curve kanina, which is ito. Ayan. So we can use this curve. So ang expect niyang input dito is a curve. So if you read it, it says empty curve parameter. Let's try to enter a point. Ayan. Maging red siya. It means an error. Data conversion failed from point to curve. Kasi here, it understands only what a curve is. If hindi niya maintindihan yon, hindi niya matatranslate. So sabi niya, point yung nilagay mo, I need a curve. So let's put a curve. Yun. So wala na yung error. You can disconnect this by right-clicking and disconnect. A parameter, an input parameter, can receive multiple data. So let's try to create another curve. Okay. So we now have two curves. Yeah. Pero yung isa, hindi pa siya na-define sa Grasshopper. So we have to define it. So let's type curve. Right-click. Set one curve. Got it? Okay. A curve param can also accommodate multiple curves. So set multiple curves. Select mo sila. Enter. So this one, it only contains this curve, yun sa taas. This one contains the second one, yun sa baba. This one contains both. The divide curve can accommodate multiple curves. So kapag gusto niyo gawin yun, you just click shift and then you drag. So now it's applying this command to both. Pero ang mangyayari kapag hindi nyo pinlik ang shift is yung nilalagay nyo would take over. So madi-disconnect sila. Yan. If wala sang shift. Also, when doing that, it organizes your data. Check natin. Here you have two sets of curves, so you have two sets of data. Yung points ng taas and yung points ng baba. The way you input or connect yung parameter will also define kung ano yung arrangement ng data na to. So for example, disconnect natin lahat. So for example, ito yung unahin natin. And then ito. Oops, sorry. So kanina, yung 27 is nasa baba. Now, nasa taas siya. Kasi ito yung inuna natin pupunta doon. If we disconnect it again, unahin natin to. Then the other one. So that arranges the data in a way that is related to yung sequence ng pag-connect mo. So if we connect this one, ganun ulit. So ilalagay niyan sa baba. Gets?
Sir Lyle,
Yes.
may interrupt saglit. Kasi parang some
Yes.
students want to first know yung how to make simple forms.
Yes, ma'am. Ano lang, pinapakita lang natin yung input and the
Alright,
output.
sige. Thank you.
Alright. So later on, binibigyan natin example yung mga components. So, yun yung sa components part. And that's how data is arranged when using the component. Next is object colors. So kanina, we've seen yung different na object colors depending on what kind of input you connect. Kapag tama siya, when you select it, it's green. Kapag mali yung input mo, may error, it's red. Pero kapag wala siyang input, it's orange. And orange says lang na there's incomplete data or you need to connect something, kulang pa yung data na binigay mo sa akin. So, you connect more data to the input parameters. Okay, so yun lang yung colors nun. If you read, 1, a parameter with no warnings and errors. 2, a parameter with warnings. 3, a component with warnings. 4, a component with no warnings, pag gray siya. And then, itong mga to is preview disabled. Then, the component is disabled. So, enable. This is a working component. So, if you disable it, di nagagana yung computation. So, it's this color. Also, you can hide yung geometry dito, but it's still working. Preview off. So, wala siya. But it's still computing. May points pa din siya. Andun pa din siya. So, these are the component parts. 1, the input parameters. And then 2 is yung icon or yung component definition. Ano ba siya? Or yung name niya. And then 3 is yung output parameter. Yan. So input, name, then output. Input, name, and then output. So those are the components and yung itsura nila. What is it about? So another thing is labeling, but siguro saka na yun. But basically sa labeling, yung input lang, wala siyang output. It's more of colorizing the preview. Okay, you can also, if you need to understand more what the component is about, you can use help. And so it has the definitions of what are the inputs are, then what are the outputs. So dito is output parameter niya is division of points. So yung point na yun, division, then tangent, then parameter. Okay, sige. Let's try to create yung mga basic shapes. So now we know how to create shapes here in Rhino, but let's try to create a shape sa ano mismo, sa Grasshopper. So let's start with the point. A point is composed of coordinates, diba? X, Y, Z. So you can just type point. Hanapin natin. Wala. Construct point pala. So you type construct point, andito siya. It starts with, kung mapapansin nyo, hindi siya orange kasi meron agad siyang default values, which is 0, 0, and 0. So if we create, tago muna natin sila. Okay, 0, 0, 0. Yeah. We can use a slider to provide an input. Or type natin 0 to, let's say, 20.00. So we now have a slider from 0.00 to 20.00. And you can control C, copy, then paste. Ito pa sila. Okay, let's start with 0 lahat. X, Y, and Z. So if you move this, it will move the coordinate of X to the right. Kasi positive eh. Diba? And this one is to the Y. Then ito is the Z. So hindi siya nag-move sa top, sa front, kita natin na it's moving. So this now defines your point. Let's check a panel. Yeah. 0, 0, 0. So pag ginalaw natin to, yun siya. It moves together with your coordinates. That's a point. To create a line, you have multiple ways of creating a line. You have a start point and end point. So copy natin to. 0, 0, 0. Okay. So to create a line, you have a start point and an end point. So ito yung component na to. Start, end. So you have 2 points. Meron siyang X, Y, Z. Meron siyang X, Y, Z. Start, end point. Now we define those points. So now you have 2, 0, 0 points dito, origin points here. So let's first define the start point. Let's try dito siya banda. Then ito mas malayo to the Y. Yeah. So you now have the ability to create a line defined by 2 points. And pwede din natin siya galawin on the Z-axis. Also, you also have to be clear and understand kung saan yung direction of that point. So for example, let me start mo end point. It means your direction is from this, from here to here. And this is the end point because later on you will be using those definitions if you want to isolate, for example, yung end point lang, or you want to isolate yung start point lang. So you know alin yung start and end point. So now this is A, this is B. And this is defined as a line with a length of 14 millimeters. So if we change these components, if you change these parameters, this also will change. Pa-clean natin siya. Ayan. So 1 na lang siya. Gets? Saan natin makikita lahat ng to? So here, Control, Alt, click, and siya sa curve. So sa curve, you have all of the primitive shapes and lines dito and different ways of defining a line. So for example, ito, line SDL. It's defined by a start point, a tangent, and a length. So, kailangan may direction. So, let's put this as a start. Let's put this at the direction. So, now, we can define a length. Ayun. So, ano ba yung naging direction niya? Pupunta siya sa point na to. So, this is the start point and this is the direction. But this is not the end point. Doon lang siya papunta. Yeah. So, pag binago mo to, babago din yung direction. Then, it now define the length. Right? So, that's another way of defining a line. So, you have multiple ways of creating lines here. And shapes. So, let's try to do a circle. So, a circle is defined by a plane and a radius. So, the plane is the XY plane. Ito. So, kaya sa top natin siya makita and not here because the plane is on the XY plane, X and Y. And now we define a radius. Pero may default siya na value which is 1. If we connect this, wala siya kasi wala siyang value. So, now you can define a circle. If naiirita kayo, andahan nyo makita yung plane na yun, what you can do is right-click, extract parameter, and then preview off. Lalabas yung plane, then preview off. Yan. Yan natin siya. So now, this is the plane. But you can also define a circle by using circle CNR or 3-point. Let's try CNR. CNR means center, normal, and radius. Normal is a vector. So, for example, ito yung circle nyo. So, ito yung centroid. Normal is the point from the centroid which is parallel to the plane. So, ito yung normal niya. So, this circle, ang normal niya is going here. So, this one is the normal. That's a vector. So, usually, nakalagay dito the default is 0, 0, 1, which means 0, 0, and then 1 siya here. So, ang normal niya is from the XY plane going to the Z plane. So, let's define the center. A center is a point, diba? So, center point. Meron tayong points dito. Yan. So, let's get this one. Yun. So, nandun yung circle natin sa point na yun. Ito yung sinasabi ko kanina. Ay, hindi. Let's try this one pala. So, this one, ayun. So, this one is defined as a reference point in Rhino. So, from here, it means na you can only move this sa Rhino component. So, you can select it and you can move it and the circle will follow. Okay, let's put a radius to that circle. So, yung point na to, this is now the anchor point for the circle. And you can move that point within the Rhino interface to wherever you want. And the definition or the definition of that circle will follow. So, kahit i-move mo to, yung radius niya, well, sumasabay ito kasi same sila ng slider. But anyway, dun siya manggagaling. Right? Dito. Kasi yun yung definition ng point natin. Right? You can also create, you can now connect this to other components. Let's say you want to, kanina meron tayong ginawa, which is divide curve, right? So this is a curve. An output of this component is a curve, which is shaped as a circle. So the resulting circle. One locally defined circle. Radius is 14.89. So now you have a curve. So pwede natin siyang, let's say, let's try to divide that curve. So since you have a curve here, you can input it into a component that needs a curve. So for example, ito sa kanina. So now what it does is it created points dividing those curves, the curve into points. So may default lang na count dito, which is 10. Let's try to create a number slider 0 to 10. Delete. Okay, we can connect this to count. Right now it says 0. So the number of divisions is 0. If you put it to 1, and 1. Isang division lang, so 1 point. 2, you have 2. And then, habang dumadami, it will divide it into equal parts. So pwede natin itong dagdagan. Let's make it max 20. Let's say 50. We can divide it into 50 parts. Yeah. So now you have a definition. And the flow of information comes from left here to right. So these are the information that we need. We converted it into another information, just so this in data. Ito is radius, then ito is location center, which is ito, and then it becomes a circle, which is a curve. And then that curve, now we divided it because of this divide curve into 15, and lalabas is points, which is ito. Right? So dito points, tangents, and parameters. So if we put a panel here, it will show you yung differences ng mga output. So here, it's a circle. Here is a point. And we have 15 points. Kasi 15 yung nilagay natin dito. 0 to 14. That's 15. Gets? And as the definition gets more complicated, of course, your geometry will get more complicated. It is now up to you kung paano nyo paglalaroan lahat ng to. So for example, let's try to move yung mga points na to pataas. So try move command. A move command moves a geometry regardless if it's a point, it's a curve, or a plane, whatever. As long as it's a geometry, it will move it to the direction that you like. So for example, move natin yung mga points na to pataas to the Z direction. So ang gusto natin i-move is yung points and not the curve. So we get the points. And then the motion is Z to the Z direction. So X, Y, and Z. So gusto na silang umakyat pa Z direction. So what we can do is put Z component, unit Z. It now converts a number slider into a vector. So 15 units to the Z direction. Ngayon natin doon. So you can now move ito kung nasan siya. But it doesn't erase yung previous points. Nandito pa rin sila. It just copies it. Kung di mo na kailangan itong mga to, you can just preview. Preview off. So right click, preview. So dito mo makikita yung difference ng preview and ng enable or disable. If we disable this, what will happen is the information flow will be cut off. Since hindi na enable siya, so disable. Mawawala na information dito. It's orange. It means there's no information flowing to it. Ito meron pa eh. Great. So mangyayari is walang information na lalabas. No values, no output. So if you enable it, nandun. But if hindi mo kailangan yung points, ayaw mo sila makita, you can just turn off the preview. And matitira yung mga hindi naka-preview off. So you can move it. Gets? So you have two sets of points. Itong point na to and yung point na to. So pag, when we compare it side by side, so this is a panel again. So you can just type panel. So let's look and peek. Ano yung laman nila? So you have 14 points. The difference nila is yung z direction lang. So they have the same coordinates sa x and y. So pag tinignan natin sa top, parang wala nangyari. Pero sa front, doon natin makikita. So sa x and y, they're similar. Sa z lang sila magkakaiba. So you have 15 different points arranged in this manner. So 0, pag ganun. Pareho sila. So if we create a line, let's try to create a line. Yung start point and end point. Banggit ko kanina, di ba, pwedeng multiple streams of information. So we have a point here, and we have a point here. So we have a point here, we have a point here. So this can be, these points can now be used as starting points. Oops. Starting points. And then these points can be used as endpoints. So what will happen is, ayun. Nag-connect sila. So itong point na to is connected to this one. Itong point na to is connected to this one. So now you have another geometry, which is these lines. Panel. Let's see panel. Yan. So you have a line that is 21 millimeters in length. Saan galing yung 21? It's from this one. Kasi ito yung distance traveled from 0 to 21z direction. So pag ginalaw mo siya, hahaba din yung lines. Right? 36 na siya. You understand, guys? Clear ba? Questions so far?
Guys, if you have questions, you can raise your virtual raise hand na lang para lalo
Sige.
kung maguguluhan. Yes.
Yeah, I know it gets complicated fast.
Thank you.
Okay. Sige, let's continue. So yun yung flow of information. It's from left to right. And you can, when doing definitions, it's more of you try to, when you design, you try to design it manually first. Like, if I want to create a cylinder, anong mga kailangan kong gawin? So, when designing parametrically, it's a different way of designing things. Kasi when we're modeling, it comes intuitively to us eh. Parang naka-autopilot ka ba pag nag 3D model ka. But this way, it's more of you're trying to understand every step. Since this is algorithmic, or you're creating a set of instructions, you have to think like that. So kung kunwari magde-design ka ng, let's say, this a glass. So meron siyang smaller circle sa baba, sa base niya, and a larger circle sa taas. So when you want to design it, you first have to define yung circle na to, and then yung circle na to. And then what happens is you have to connect it together, right? So in your mind, you're going to create a set of instructions wherein, okay, I'll try to define the base circle first. And then, anong next? Paano darating yung line ko dito papunta doon? So, I need a height or I need to move those points pataas, right? So, you think like that. With simple geometries, parang bakit pa namin gagamitin ito kung kaya ko naman siya i-model mabilisan? With simple geometries, pwede. So there are things that you would want to automate and there are things that you would want to design. But in more complicated geometries, it's easier for us to define a certain geometry and replicate it than modeling it one by one. So what you're designing is the process of creating this and then multiplying that into 1,000 different iterations than to create and model those 1,000 iterations one by one. It's sana hindi pa rin kayo nalilito. Kung meron kayong mga questions, you bring them up. Walang questions so far sa ginawa natin? Lahat nakasunod? Okay, sige. Okay, let's move forward. Here kasi, sa Grasshopper Primer, of course, di naman natin siya kukuha lahat, no? Pero let's just go back to the table of content and discuss at least a brief discussion on what what Grasshopper can help us with. So for example, building blocks of algorithms. Punta tayo doon. So kanina, kahit pa paano naintindihan natin what are points, what are lines or edges, what are planes. So you have the X and Y plane, Y and Z plane, X and Z plane. So laging dapat oriented kayo where you are with regards to planes kasi baka makita nyo bakit walang nangyayari. Ngayon pala naglalaro ka on the XY plane. Ang need mong gawin is XZ plane. Diba? So a vector naman is a direction from one point to another. So okay, punta sa vector. A vector is a geometric quantity describing direction and magnitude. Magnitude is yung value of that direction. So for example, balik tayo sa definition na to. Ito, we moved it. This is the direction. Direction is Z, going from this point to that on the Z direction. And this is the magnitude. So from this point to this point, ang magnitude is kung ano yung value ng distance na yun. And then yung direction is saan siya pupunta. So for example, this XYZAA, XYZBBB. So dito siya punta. And then planes, planes are flat surfaces that extend infinitely into two directions. Basically, define it as X, Y, X, Z, Y, Z. Yun yung basic na coordinates plane. But of course, if you have a plane, for example, itong notebook of this book, kailangan wala yung background. Okay, mahirap. Ayan. For example, this book. Yeah. This can be defined as a Y, a X and Z plane. But, syempre, hindi naman defined lang into XY, YZ na planes lang, di ba? You can move this in different directions. But, it's still flat. So, this flat plane is now can be used as an orientation for something. So, yung circle mo can be made here. So yung circle mo, instead of it being on a fixed X, Y, Y, Z, XZ plane, pwede siyang gumagalaw. So later on, it will be more useful for you. But right now, it's more of you try to understand the terms and how we're gonna use it. So this is one example of that. Ito nandito sa Mode Lab. You can check it out step by step. But basically, it uses a point as an attractor wherein doon mo orient yung mga circles natin. So here, naalala nyo kanina, may ginawa tayong circle with a normal. So right now, ang normal kasi niya is, ano ba yun? Ito yung circle na to. Ang normal niya is the Z pupunta doon, di ba? But you can create lines. You can create lines from those circles papunta sa point na to and i-orient niya yung normal na yun to those lines. So parang ito. And now, dun sila lahat nakaharap. You can try it out yourself later on. Meron naman dito step-by-step instruction. But let's discuss muna lahat ng meron dito. Okay. So you have mathematics and expressions, which we have discussed briefly kanina, yung multiplication. You have math here. Ito. So merong addition. You add two values, subtraction, division, multiplication. And you have several other operators there that you will be needing later on. Dito, itong mga to, you would need when sifting through information. For example, ang gusto mo lang lumusot na information are equal to 5. So lahat ng 5, yun lang lulusot. Okay, you can use this. Or anything that is, for example, you're sifting through a large number of circles. Gusto mo lahat ng radius lang na more than 50. So, ano ito? Larger than 50. Yun lang yung lulusot. So, lahat ng larger than, lahat ng information is lulusot siya doon. And you have different operators. Designing with lists. Okay, this is after you will be able to create yung basic geometries. I'm sure later on pag you're tinkering with all of this sa curves, dito kayo mag-uumpisa sa curves. So lahat ng to paglalaroan niyo mamaya kasi madali lang to eh. Like may radius lang, number of segments, so puro number sliders lang to, fillet, ganyan. Paglalaroan niyo to. But when you are able to have a command on those basic components, ang next na mahirap, and this is yung from beginner to advanced, ito yung parang leap wherein you will be able to understand na when you are able to understand lists, that's when you start to create more complex geometries. Because again, all of this is translation of one data to another, creating new information from the previous data. So kung makikita nyo dito, kanina it's just a point and the number. Nag-translate siya into a curve, into a circle. And then yung curve na yun, na-translate natin siya into points. And then yung points na yun, na-translate natin siya, na-copyhan natin siya and created a new set of lines. So, you are one by one, step by step, you are creating lists. So, ito, list 1, list 2. So, these are all lists of information. So, yun yung tinatawag na lists sa Grasshopper. Yun daw na list sa Grasshopper. So, in a list, so sa panel, you have 1, yung list item, kung pang ilan siya. And then 2,
Yung 1 is yung item itself, and then 2 is yung index. Yung index is its location within a list. So for example, let's try this out. Itong panel na to is of this component. Itong panel to is of this component. Itong mga to. So, ang 0 na to is, hulaan ko lang, is ito. And then next is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So that's how information is organized in Grasshopper. It's through lists. And merong specific set of components specifically made to identify information from that list. So for example, list length. Gaano ba kahaba yung list na to? It says 15. So it means it has 15 components. So yung mga ganito. List item is another thing na magiging important for you later on. So list item, what it does is it extracts a certain information from the list. So right now, ang index na kinuha natin is 0. So yun yung kinuha niya. 0 to 15. If I click this, magiging green siya. So yun yung item. So tama yung hula natin. So yun yung point na yun. Una, 0 and 1, 2. Kaso baligtad ako. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. Kapag sumobra siya, babalik lang siya dun sa una. So these are the components for manipulating those lists. So you have shift list, which offsets, moves yung information. So kunwari ito, isi-shift mo siyang dalawa. Mag-move siya. Parang, so yung 0 magiging 1 na. So that's shift list. Then yung 1 magiging 2 na. And then you have partition, which is you're dividing a list into a certain size or chunk. And you can reverse the list. So babalik na rin mo lang. And so, una to, magiging huli siya. So, when you started tinkering with those things, you will be able to create more dynamic geometries. Okay. We have 30 minutes. So fast track lang. Everything here, everything na kailangan nyo as a beginner is here in the primer. But you will not be readily be able to create kung anumang complex geometries. But at least nandun yung basic. So sir, how can we be able to advance our understanding of Grasshopper? What I did personally when I was in college or after is pumunta ako sa Grasshopper forum. So dito, remember na sabi ko kanina is before you do a design, you have to create muna, you have to draw it first. And you have to understand how it will be designed if you were to design it manually. Because if you can't design it manually, you will not be able to design it parametrically. So dito, if meron kayong mga questions, so for example, sir, gusto kong i-twist siguro. Gusto kong i-twist ito and create a twisting tower. So paano gagawin yon? So initially, if you have an idea, you go to discussion forum. And also, ganito din ginawa, ganito din tinuro ko sa students ko, is to learn how to find certain parts of an algorithm to fit what you want to do. So for example, Grasshopper 3D only. Twist a geometry. Ay, pa tayo. So you can have a similar, you can look for similar problems na ginagawa na din ng iba. So I have a twisting geometric, I want to cut it, something ganyan. You will not be able to find yung exact naman, but at least there will be answers there that may lead you to what exactly you're looking for. So for example, I haven't had success with a triangular morph using a twisted box. So minsan yung mga successes nila, they also show it here. And wait, wala pang yung merong ano. So you can ask, if wala kayong makitang specific, you can ask them also. You create an account here and you can ask. How do I panel a geometry across a surface without distorting? So nandun. It's more of, this is open source kasi. Grasshopper is open source. And you will be able to find a lot of discussions here and also definitions. Ano naman sila? The community is very generous, and dito makaka-download din kayo ng mga example of definitions. Kasi minsan sasagutin nila, for example, ito, sila mismo gagawa and then papakita nila sa'yo and they will send you the definition itself to study, for you to study. And you can ask questions here that would help you out in your journey in understanding Grasshopper. But okay, let's go back muna. After lists, yun yung pinaka after understanding lists, mas madali na kayong makaka progress sa Grasshopper kasi lists and data trees are come together. Data trees naman is more of how each information will flow from one component to another. So for example, so right now, madali kasi siya eh. Meron kang isa lang na branch. So you have data trees wherein you have multiple branches. So let's say I want to create a circle sa mga points na to. Okay. So we get these points and create a circle. Itong points na to. Yan. So yung circle na yun is now resting on these. And let's try to divide them also. So you now have points within the circle that stands on this line. When you look at the data tree, when you look at the panel, you will see now there are multiple lists here. Kasi with each circle holds a set of points. So itong set na to is one circle, itong set na to is another circle. And when you look at the parameter, let's say param viewer, there you will see the data tree. Double click, makikita mo yung data tree. This means na in this list, you have 15 different lists that contain, so 15 different lists that contain a list again of points. So, ano lang, definition lang ng data tree. So, this is a data tree. A data tree is where within those lists na madami is an information located. Of course, we can't try to understand this right now, but I'm just trying to point you to yung jargons na medyo may encounter nyo lagi as you read through yung forum. So dito sa table of contents again. Dito sa table of contents, you have yung lists and yung data tree. Ito yung magiging mas may encounter nyo lagi later on when you're dealing with a more complex and more a longer definition. Kasi later on, baka gusto nyo ayusin. For example, ito lang, itong circle lang na to. So how would you be able to extract yun lang? So for now, siguro, what you can do is to try and recreate lang yung simple geometries, and you try to look into, dito sa curves especially, you try to check, how do I create an arc? So tignan nyo to, plane, radius, and angle. How do I try to create an arc using 3 points, a polygon, a rectangle, using 2 points? So ito, you tinker around with it, and you try to use purely Grasshopper. So even yung mga points, you construct a point, XYZ, you construct a point, XYZ. So para mas defined nyo, mas control nyo, let's try not to use muna Rhino for it. Kasi alam ko mas magiging makati kayo na parang dito na lang, parang mas madali, magagalaw ko na siya. Nagagalaw ko na siya dito. So at least here, you will be able to see yung flow of information. Although mas cumbersome to start with, but that's the thing with Grasshopper. It's overwhelming sa una, but once you get the hang of it, how each component relates to each other, mas maging smooth na yung transition nyo into parametric design. So start with curves. Dito muna, sa mga curves muna. And you also try to look into itong mga curve analysis. So for example, dito kasi sa curve analysis, you will be able to extract different information of a curve. So, kunwari ito, length of a curve, point in a curve. At a point on a curve. So, kunwari ito, nasa na ba yung circle natin? Ito. Ito pala. So a point on a curve is from 0 to 1. This is a parameter wherein you can locate a certain point within a curve. So dito pwedeng 1/4, 1/3, 1/2, 2/3, 3/4, 1. So these are analysis tools that you will be able also to see kung nasaan, where a point is, where a curve is in relation to other points and other curves. So again, let's start with primitives muna, and you tinker with that. And mas suggest ko na paglaruan nyo and pagdikit-dikitin nyo is move, scale, rotate. Ayan. Itong tatlong to, you will be able to create a skyscraper. You know naman what a skyscraper is. So siguro yun yung assignment ko na hindi ko ma-check. Assignment ko for you. Ito din yung first activity namin sa Emerge using Grasshopper. Using this tree, how can you create a skyscraper? So first, you define a skyscraper. A skyscraper is a building wherein you have, so a building where you have multiple floors. And then yung floors na yun, they are defined by, for example, a shape. Let's say a circle. So yung circle na yun can represent one floor. and you can create multiple floors, right? So copy, and then you can either use scale to make it thinner. You can use or smaller. You can use rotate to rotate the floor plates. And you can create an interesting skyscraper using just these trees, just these components. Tatlo. So move, scale, rotate. Another siguro I can suggest is series. For that activity. A series is it creates a number, a set of numbers using start, step, and count. So start usually is 0. A step is so from 0, one step is 1. So 0, 1, 2, 3. Kung a step is 2, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. Count is gaano karaming steps yon. So for example, you have 10 steps of 1. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 until 10. So if you have 10 counts of 2, so 2, 4, 6, 8 hanggang 20. So ito pa lang, you will be now able to create a skyscraper. For example, clue na lang, clue. So ito, you have 9, 10. 10 counts of one step. So you now have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And let's create something circle kanina. Disable natin sila lahat. You can create a series of circles using a series of points. So, di ba ang circle is so di ba ang circle is a plane and a radius. So if you have a point, construct point. We have a point that is defined by xyz. Okay. So you have a point that is defined by xyz. So a circle is basically kung saan mo siya ididikit na point and the radius. So you can create multiple radius siguro. Yan, using this. Bakit siya naging ganun? Kasi meron kang 0, 1, 2, 3. So you're creating multiple information. You're inputting multiple information. So lahat ng yon, it results to multiple outputs. And so circle, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Information. So ang clue ko sa inyo is you can use move and series to create a series of circles. Easy. What happens is you're giving a factor of multiple series, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So multiple motions yan. Kinopy niya to 1, kinopy niya to 2, kinopy niya 3, kinopy niya to 4. And then this is one step. So kapag ginawa mo yung step na mas malaki, so mas mataas yung floor to floor height mo. Diba? So 2, 3, 4, these are your floors. Of course, this is just a circle. And you can use your imagination how to, let's say, use scale. You can use scale. Yung mga geometries na hawak mo na, itong mga to, you can use scale. You can use a move command again. Or you can divide those curves and create lines, etc. So try to tinker with scale, rotate, move, construct point, and then yung ibang primitives na pwede nyong gamitin. Just nasa curve. So sa curve primitives, you can create different shapes here. So you can create a polygon. So pwedeng yun yung maging geometry mo. Diba? Kayong bahala. So ito muna. Itong lahat ng components na ito muna yung paglaruan natin. On your own and create a skyscraper. So that's the challenge. Questions? No questions?
Masyadong seryoso, sir. Parang na,
Baka na-overwhelmed sila,
yeah.
ma'am.
So,
Pero ganun, actually ganun talaga lagi eh. Pero parang siyang self-discovery kasi. Unlike other 3D modeling programs, other like CAD, ganyan, hindi kasi, it's more of you on how, since these are set of instructions, it's how you operate talaga how you think when you create a set of instruction. So, ikaw, Miss Erica, iba yung way mo ng, let's say, you wanna draw a cylinder. Pwedeng may maunang part kung anong gagawin mo sa sarili kong process also. So, we have different processes. So, siguro, mas may intindihan and mas matatry out nila once they actually try it. I'm sure they are trying it out themselves right now. So
yes.
if you wanna share, pwede then you can show it to us here. But questions, kung meron kayong questions, meron kayong gustong gawin, sir, may gusto kong gawin, you can reach me also through Facebook. Message nyo lang ako.
So far, wala kasi dito sa chat box. Mukhang habang ginagawa mo, sir, yung demo, they're also trying it.
Yeah.
And, dahil mga first-timers tong mga to, medyo.
I will try to show you some works siguro.
Yes.
Na lang.
But I see familiar people din. Hindi si Matthew. Hi, Matthew. Ano ba to? Refresher sa'yo.
Hindi na, magaling yan si Matt.
Quiet siya. Ano daw?
Hi, Matt.
Support.
Okay. Let's try this one. Let's show you lang. This is one from an Emerge project. So, ang polygon input nila is ito, yung green. And then they tried to explode it and rotated yung lines na yun. And then they shifted the line and created rectangular 3 points. Actually, okay ito linagay talaga nila kung anong command So now create sila ng rectangle that rotates. And yun yung naging basis nila for their plan. To create structural columns using yung points. So, ito kasi is parang palengke siya na defined by, ginawa nilang automated yung pag-define ng mga stalls, ganyan, using this.
So,
and then, tesselation.
planning. Medyo planning siya. So
Oo.
this is emerge 2, final nila. Ayan. So this is based on a design. So these are the parameters, yung sizes pala ng digesters are based on these. So magagamit din nila yung mga plus, minus, addition, subtraction, multiplication dun sa pag-convert ng mga values nila. So dito in this case, ganun din ginawa nila.
Okay. Oh, wow. Very interesting. Pati sa pag-start ng or pag-set
Ito,
or pag-start ng design na, sir. Mula sa
Yeah.
simpleng measurements to
Yeah.
creating yung parameters and creating multiple ano tawag dito? Designs na parang
Yes.
nag-iba yung look then, no?
Parang anything that is repetitive kasi you can
Mm.
automate it. So parang yun yung ginagawa nila here. So ito is another example. Planning din siya eh. So dito naman it's defined by in this case programs are locked into gridiron pattern. So may pattern siya and then locked sila on certain geometries. Then yung size is dependent I think on some computation also. So yan, buildable space proportioned by the program. Kung anong tinuro ko kanina, doon din sila nag-start.
Mm.
So this is emerge 2, so second term. Mostly they tried muna syempre yung mga simple geometries and then eventually sir paano ba namin gagawin to ganyan. Meron kami naisip. It always starts with the parametric thinking eh. Na you break down a certain thing and how you would design. Kasi pag marunong ka na ng let's say SketchUp, marunong ka na 3ds Max. Pag nagmo-model ka nun, para ka na nagsasculpt eh. It's second nature to you eh. This one breaks that. You go back to the points, the lines, and the planes, then yung surfaces, then yung orientation. So lahat ng yon, it breaks yung original mo na, yung intuitive notion mo na how you would model as if you're sculpting. Dito hindi. Parang it goes back to basic. But then, kapag nasanay ka na, parang ka na lang nagsasculpt, but then you're not 3D modeling. You're more of coding na.
Mm.
So siguro ma-overwhelm kayo ngayon, but look at them. They started with this. And then eventually, mas complex din nagagawa nila. Di ko lang na-download yung ibang submissions nila. Pero sa Emerge 3, meron ng mas complicated
Complex,
na yung
yeah.
ginagawa nila.
Yeah. Pwedeng multi-level. Vertical na ito kasi parang medyo horizontal yung development.
Ito is one.
Wow.
But sa Emerge, hindi kami Grasshopper lang. So, yung ibang nag-Arduino, yung iba. Depende sa kanila.
Oh, wow. Question, sir. Dito sa Grasshopper, instead na sa mouse lang, you can also use keyboard shortcuts?
Yes, ma'am. That you just type it. You type ka lang din ng ibang ano. Or, also, you can...
Kasi diba, parang usually softwares laging nag-update ng interface, tas nawawala yung mga NX, yung mga dati mong alam na mga...
Sobrang dami nito.
Oo. Better
So,
na...
ang ginagawa ko na lang is, iba tayo naka-share ko. Sorry. Ayan. Sobrang dami nito, Miss Erica. So, hindi mo memorize lahat. Even me, hindi ko memorize nasan sila. So, kunwari may naisip akong component, ito type ko lang, ano ang component yun? Divide ba or something? Kasi pag kunwari, tinry mo divide, nandyan na yung mga similar. So, hahanapin mo siya. So, list. So, nandito na sila lahat. Mas madali pag-search.
Importante lang, alam mo yung base commands, yung gano'n.
Oo, yung mga hanapin mo. But, you will learn that through practice kasi. Kaya ako nabanggit agad yung Grasshopper Forum. Because that's how I learned also. Meron kang iisipin. That's why you have to know na you know how to design it. You just don't know how to code it. Tatanungin mo na lang sa mga tao kung ito gusto kong gawin, paano ko ba siya gagawin? And most probably, meron ng taong nakagawa nun or nagtanong nun. It's just a matter of looking for ano yung perfect for you. And wala ring walang similar codes. So, yung isang definition mo can be from different people. Na ikaw mismo yung nag-orchestrate at nag-compose.
Yes, and probably parang yung mga gumawa nun are just references for you to be able to create your own codes, diba? Para makapag-create ka rin ng sarili mong design.
Mhm. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. So, yun. I'll show you lang siguro din yung, pinakita ko naman din yung before. I never imagined, this is in collaboration with another designer also. Well, yung design is si Sangay. But in coding, someone helped me also. Na from simple geometries na ganun na ginagawa una, you can actually do these kinds of things later on eh. Parang ano lang talaga. Ito, sa ano pala to? Sa emerge din to. Yung kanina, tama naman yung pinapakita ko, Miss. No? Yung kanina is ito, di ba?
Yes.
This is emerge 2. This is now their emerge 3.
Oh,
progress.
wow.
Kahapon nag-consult sila eh. Mas complex pa dito yung ginagawa nila now. So this started from zero talaga. So wag silang matakot na hindi ko maintindihan to. Now, hindi mo siya maintindihan. Kaya focus muna kayo dito sa lahat ng components na nasa screen. Focus kayo dito. And kahit ito lang makakreate yung skyscraper. Let's start with that siguro. Huwag niyo na muna isipin yung pinagagawa ng mga students ko right now.
And magsisimula siya sa practice.
Yes.
Okay. I guess, since wala namang tanong, and we're over time, thank you, Sir Lyle, for the very overwhelming but inspiring two-part lecture series. So let's give Sir Lyle a warm virtual applause.